Picture this. You are lying unconscious in a hospital bed after a devastating car accident, fighting for your life, while your own family gathers in the hallway outside your room to discuss how they will divide your inheritance when you die. Then your husband, who they thought was deployed overseas, walks through those hospital doors and overhears every single word. What happens next will restore your faith in true loyalty and show you that sometimes the family you choose is worth more than the family you were born into. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Victoria Chen Martinez, and until 3 months ago, I believed that family loyalty was a sacred bond that transcended personal interests in individual ambitions. I had spent 34 years of my life operating under the assumption that blood relationships created unbreakable connections based on genuine love and mutual support. This belief system had shaped every major decision I had made as an adult, from my career choices to my financial priorities to the way I structured my personal relationships. I was the eldest daughter in a family that had immigrated to San Diego from Taiwan when I was 8 years old. My parents, Dr. James Chen and Helen Chen, had sacrificed enormously to establish themselves in America, with my father eventually building a successful cardiology practice while my mother developed a thriving real estate investment business. Their success had created opportunities for their children that would have been impossible in their country of origin, but it had also established expectations for achievement and family contribution that shaped our entire household dynamic. Growing up as the responsible oldest child, I had internalized the message that my primary value lay in my ability to support and enable the success of other family members. While my younger sister Amanda pursued her passion for art and my youngest brother Kevin explored various entrepreneurial ventures, I had chosen the practical path of becoming a biomedical engineer, a career that provided stable income and professional respectability that my parents could proudly discuss with their social circle. My decision to join the military after college had initially disappointed my family, who viewed my service commitment as an unnecessary delay in establishing the civilian career they expected from me. However, when my military experience led to specialized expertise in medical device development and ultimately to a position as Senior Engineering Director at Prometheus Medical Technologies, their perspective shifted to pride in my achievement and appreciation for the financial security my success provided. The truth was that my salary as a senior engineering director, combined with the substantial stock options I had accumulated over 8 years with the company, had made me the most financially successful member of my immediate family. This success had created an unspoken dynamic where I had become the family member who provided financial assistance during emergencies, contributed to major purchases like my parents' home renovation, and served as a safety net for my siblings when their own ventures encountered difficulties. Amanda's art career, while creatively fulfilling, generated irregular income that required periodic supplementation to maintain her lifestyle and studio space in the expensive San Francisco art district. I had quietly provided thousands of dollars over the years to cover her rent during slow periods, fund exhibition expenses, and purchase professional equipment that advanced her artistic development. These contributions were presented as loans, but both Amanda and I understood that repayment was unlikely given the unpredictable nature of her income. Kevin's entrepreneurial pursuits had proven even more costly to the family finances. His series of startup attempts, ranging from a food truck business to a cryptocurrency trading platform, had consistently failed due to his combination of excessive optimism and insufficient business planning. Each failure had resulted in requests for financial assistance that I had provided without complaint, viewing my support as investment in his eventual success rather than as subsidies for his poor decision-making. My parents had never directly requested financial support, but their subtle references to increased medical insurance costs, property tax burdens, and retirement planning concerns had prompted me to establish a monthly transfer that supplemented their income and ensured their comfort during their senior years. This arrangement had never been formalized or acknowledged explicitly, but it had become an expected component of their financial planning that they relied upon for maintaining their standard of living. The irony of this financial dynamic was that while my income supported much of my family's lifestyle, my personal spending remained remarkably modest. I lived in a comfortable but unremarkable townhouse in Coronado, drove a reliable but unremarkable sedan, and maintained a wardrobe focused on professional functionality rather than fashion trends. My major expenditure was the comprehensive life insurance policy I had purchased when I married my husband Marcus, a policy that would provide substantial financial security for my family in the event of my unexpected death. Marcus Rodriguez Martinez was a Navy SEAL whose deployment schedule meant that he was frequently absent for months at a time on classified missions that prevented regular communication. Our relationship had developed during my military service, when we had met during a joint training exercise that had brought together engineering personnel and special operations teams. His combination of intellectual curiosity, physical capability, and unwavering integrity had attracted me in ways that contradicted my family's expectations about appropriate marriage partners. My family's reaction to Marcus had been complicated by cultural preferences, professional prejudices, and class considerations that they had never explicitly articulated but had communicated through subtle disapproval and persistent questions about our long-term compatibility. They had attended our wedding with polite enthusiasm but had never fully embraced him as a family member, treating him more like an interesting acquaintance whose presence was tolerated rather than welcomed. The challenges of maintaining a marriage with someone whose professional obligations required extended absences had tested both my emotional resilience and my commitment to our relationship. Marcus's deployments meant that I frequently attended family gatherings alone, managed household responsibilities independently, and made important decisions without the benefit of his input or support. These circumstances had reinforced my role as the self-sufficient family member who handled challenges without requiring assistance from others. My position at Prometheus Medical Technologies had evolved over 8 years from entry-level engineering work to senior leadership responsibilities that encompassed research direction, regulatory compliance, and strategic planning for medical device development. The company specialized in advanced cardiac monitoring systems that required integration of cutting-edge sensor technology with sophisticated data analysis capabilities, work that utilized both my engineering background and my understanding of military-grade reliability requirements. The stock options I had accumulated through my tenure at Prometheus had increased in value dramatically as the company had grown from a small startup to a major player in the medical device industry. Recent discussions about potential acquisition by larger medical technology companies had suggested that my equity position could be worth several $1,000,000 if such transactions were completed successfully. This financial potential represented more wealth than anyone in my family had ever possessed, but I had kept these details private to avoid creating unrealistic expectations or complicated family dynamics. My daily routine reflected the structured discipline that had served me well throughout my military service and civilian career. I maintained regular exercise schedules, organized meal planning, and systematic approaches to both professional responsibilities and personal obligations. This predictability had created stability during Marcus's deployments, while also ensuring that I met all my commitments to both my employer and my family members. The October morning that changed everything had begun like any other Tuesday in my carefully organized life. I had completed my usual 5-mile run through Coronado, reviewed project reports over coffee, and prepared for a day of meetings focused on regulatory approval processes for our latest cardiac monitoring device. Marcus was in the middle of a 3-month deployment to an undisclosed location, with communication limited to brief emails sent through secure military channels that provided minimal information about his activities or expected return date. The emergency department at UC San Diego Medical Center became my destination that afternoon not because of any planned appointment, but because of a catastrophic accident that occurred during my commute home from work. A delivery truck had run a red light at the intersection of Orange Avenue and 4th Street, striking my sedan with sufficient force to render me unconscious and create injuries serious enough to require immediate trauma surgery and intensive care monitoring. The medical team that treated my injuries worked with professional efficiency to stabilize my condition and address the internal bleeding, fractured ribs, and severe concussion that had resulted from the impact. My emergency contact information led hospital personnel to notify my family about the accident and my condition, bringing them to the hospital during the critical hours when medical outcomes remained uncertain and survival was not guaranteed. What I could not have anticipated was that my life-threatening medical emergency would provide my family with an opportunity to discuss inheritance planning and financial arrangements that revealed their true priorities and feelings about our relationships. While I remained unconscious and unaware of these conversations, my family gathered in the hospital corridor to engage in discussions that would fundamentally alter my understanding of their affection, loyalty, and commitment to my well-being. The revelation of these conversations would come later, through circumstances that none of us anticipated, and in ways that would expose the difference between the family relationships I had imagined and the transactional arrangements that actually governed our interactions. The contrast between their public expressions of concern and their private calculations about my financial value would force me to reconsider everything I believed about loyalty, love, and the obligations that truly bind people together during moments of crisis and uncertainty. This medical emergency would become the catalyst for discoveries that would transform my understanding of authentic relationships and demonstrate that the bonds we choose through commitment and shared values can prove stronger than the connections we inherit through genetics and tradition. The lessons learned during those critical days would reshape my priorities and reveal the true meaning of family loyalty in ways that I could never have anticipated before. That October afternoon changed the trajectory of my entire life. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Consciousness returned to me gradually, like emerging from deep water into filtered sunlight. The first sensation was the steady beeping of monitors, followed by the antiseptic smell that marked hospital environments universally. My throat felt raw from the breathing tube that had been removed hours earlier, and every attempt to move sent sharp reminders through my torso about the extent of my injuries. The neurologist had explained that my concussion was severe enough to cause memory gaps and disorientation, but as awareness slowly returned, I found myself able to piece together fragments of what had brought me to this sterile room. The nursing staff had been exceptionally attentive, checking my vital signs every hour and ensuring that my pain medication maintained effectiveness without causing excessive sedation. Dr. Sarah Williams, the trauma surgeon who had operated on my internal injuries, had visited that morning to explain the surgical procedures and outline the recovery timeline that would govern the next several weeks of my life. Her professional optimism was tempered by realistic expectations about the extended healing process that lay ahead. What struck me most during those first conscious hours was the absence of my family members, who had apparently maintained a vigil during the critical period, when my survival remained uncertain, but had departed once medical staff confirmed that my condition had stabilized. The nurses mentioned that my parents and siblings had been present throughout the previous day and night, taking turns in the waiting area and speaking regularly with medical personnel about my progress and prognosis. My phone, retrieved from the wreckage of my sedan and somehow still functional despite the accident, contained dozens of missed calls and text messages from colleagues, friends, and extended family members who had learned about my accident through social media posts and word-of-mouth communication. The volume of concern and support from my professional network at Prometheus Medical Technologies was particularly touching, with my entire engineering team contributing to a coordinated effort to cover my responsibilities during my recovery period. Marcus remained unreachable through normal communication channels, a frustrating reality that accompanied his current deployment status. The military liaison officer who had contacted my emergency contacts explained that notification procedures for family emergencies required specific protocols and security clearances that could delay communication for several days, depending on operational circumstances. This uncertainty about when Marcus would learn about my accident added another layer of isolation to an already disorienting situation. The afternoon of my second day in intensive care brought unexpected clarity about family dynamics that had previously remained hidden beneath surface expressions of concern and support. Dr. Williams had mentioned that my condition had improved sufficiently to consider transferring me from intensive care to a standard recovery room, a development that represented significant progress toward eventual discharge and home recovery. My hospital room was situated near the end of a corridor that connected to a family consultation area, where relatives could gather for private conversations without disturbing patients or interfering with medical procedures. The consultation area was designed with comfortable seating and sufficient space for extended discussions, making it an ideal location for families to process medical information and coordinate support strategies during health crises. What I could not have anticipated was that this consultation area would become the setting for conversations that would fundamentally alter my understanding of my family relationships and reveal priorities that contradicted every assumption I had maintained about their feelings toward me. The discovery of these conversations occurred through circumstances that none of us had planned, and in ways that exposed truths that might otherwise have remained permanently concealed. During the late afternoon hours, when hospital activity typically decreased, and visiting restrictions limited the number of people in patient areas, I became aware of familiar voices emanating from the consultation area adjacent to my room. The combination of thin walls, quiet corridors, and my heightened awareness due to medication effects made it possible to hear conversations that were intended to remain private among family members. The initial discussion seemed focused on practical arrangements for my care and recovery, with my mother coordinating meal deliveries and my siblings discussing transportation assistance for my eventual return home. These conversations reflected the supportive family dynamic that I had expected and appreciated, demonstrating their willingness to adjust their schedules and commitments to ensure my needs were addressed during the healing process. However, as their discussion continued, the tone and content shifted toward topics that surprised me with their focus on financial considerations rather than health concerns. My father's voice, which I had learned to recognize through years of family dinners and holidays, became the dominant presence in a conversation that seemed to center on estate planning and inheritance arrangements that I had never discussed with any family members. The doctors said her injuries are serious but not necessarily life-threatening, my father was saying with the clinical detachment that characterized his approach to medical discussions. However, this accident has made me realize that we need to understand her financial situation more completely. She has never shared details about her stock options or her life insurance policies, and we need that information for proper family planning. My mother's response revealed a practical concern that I had never suspected influenced her perspective on our relationship. Victoria has always been secretive about her finances, even when she was helping us with expenses. I know she makes good money at that medical device company, but she never talks about investments or savings. If something serious happens to her, we need to know what kind of resources would be available for her care. The conversation continued with my siblings, contributing observations and questions that gradually revealed their shared assumption that my financial resources represented family assets that should be accessible for collective benefit rather than individual control. Amanda's artistic career had apparently created ongoing financial pressures that she expected my potential inheritance could address, while Kevin's entrepreneurial failures had generated debts that he viewed as family obligations rather than personal responsibilities. "I've been thinking about this for months," Amanda said with an intensity that surprised me. "Victoria has been supporting all of us for years, but she never talks about her long-term plans or whether she expects us to repay what she has given us. If her condition gets worse, we need to know whether her assets would be available to continue that support or whether we need to make other arrangements." Kevin's contribution to the discussion revealed a level of entitlement that I had not previously recognized in our sibling relationships. The way I see it, Victoria's money has always been family money. She doesn't have kids, and Marcus is never around anyway. If something happens to her, the logical thing would be for her assets to support the family members who have been depending on her help all along. The callousness of these statements, delivered while I lay injured in a hospital bed just yards away from their conversation, created an emotional impact that rivaled the physical trauma from my accident. The realization that my family viewed my potential death primarily as a financial opportunity rather than a personal loss challenged fundamental assumptions about love, loyalty, and the bonds that I had believed connected us as relatives. My father's voice returned to dominate the conversation with practical concerns that revealed his approach to family relationships as strategic arrangements rather than emotional connections. "We need to find out about her life insurance policies and beneficiary designations. Military spouses usually carry substantial coverage, and if Marcus is listed as the primary beneficiary, we need to understand what that means for family financial security." The discussion that followed involved detailed speculation about my financial assets, potential inheritance arrangements, and strategies for ensuring that my resources would benefit family members rather than being controlled by Marcus or distributed according to legal requirements that might not align with their preferences. Their conversation revealed extensive knowledge about my income, spending patterns, and financial contributions that they had apparently been monitoring and analyzing without my awareness. My mother's comments about my marriage reflected attitudes that explained the subtle disapproval I had sensed during family gatherings over the years. Marcus has never really been part of our family culture. He doesn't understand our values or our commitment to taking care of each other. If Victoria's assets go to him, we could lose access to the financial support that has been sustaining our lifestyle for years. Amanda's response demonstrated her perspective on marriage as a financial arrangement rather than an emotional partnership. Victoria has always put family first, even before Marcus. She has been supporting us since college, and her marriage shouldn't change those priorities. If her insurance money goes to him instead of us, it would be like losing everything we have been counting on for our security. Kevin contributed his characteristic blend of optimism and entitlement to the discussion. Maybe we should talk to Victoria about updating her beneficiary designations while she is still conscious and able to make decisions. If we explain how much the family depends on her support, she would probably want to ensure that her assets continue to help us, even if something happens to her. The conversation continued, with increasingly detailed discussions about my potential net worth, speculation about my stock options and retirement accounts, and strategic planning for approaching me about estate planning changes that would benefit them rather than my husband. Their casual discussion of my death as a financial opportunity rather than a personal tragedy revealed priorities that contradicted every assumption I had maintained about our family relationships. My father's concluding comments summarized their collective perspective with brutal clarity. Victoria has always been the responsible one who takes care of everyone else. Even if her condition improves, this accident should remind her about the importance of ensuring that her assets continue to support the family members who need them most. Marcus has his military benefits and career prospects, but we have been depending on her help for years. The emotional impact of overhearing this conversation created a psychological trauma that competed with my physical injuries for attention and healing. The realization that my family viewed me primarily as a financial resource rather than a beloved daughter and sister challenged my fundamental understanding of love, loyalty, and the obligations that connect family members during times of crisis and uncertainty. As their voices faded and they apparently departed the consultation area, I lay in my hospital bed processing the implications of what I had discovered about their true priorities and feelings. The contrast between their public expressions of concern for my welfare and their private calculations about my financial value forced me to reconsider every assumption I had maintained about family relationships and the nature of authentic love and support. The knowledge that my potential death represented an opportunity rather than a loss in their thinking created an isolation that extended far beyond the physical separation of hospitalization. I realized that the family relationships I had cherished and prioritized throughout my adult life were fundamentally different from what I had believed them to be, based on transactional calculations rather than emotional connections that transcended material considerations. This revelation about my family's true priorities would prove to be only the beginning of discoveries that would reshape my understanding of loyalty, love, and the difference between relationships based on convenience versus those founded on genuine commitment and mutual respect. The conversation I had overheard would serve as the catalyst for changes that would transform not only my relationship with my family, but my entire approach to determining who deserved my trust, support, and emotional investment in the years ahead. The hours following my discovery of my family's inheritance discussion passed with excruciating slowness, each minute marked by the steady rhythm of monitoring equipment that served as a mechanical counterpoint to my racing thoughts. The pain medication that had previously provided welcome relief from my physical injuries now seemed inadequate against the psychological trauma of understanding how thoroughly I had misunderstood the fundamental nature of my family relationships throughout my adult life. Sleep became impossible as my mind replayed fragments of their conversation, analyzing each statement for evidence of affection that I might have missed while focusing on their financial calculations. The clinical environment of the hospital room, with its sterile surfaces and institutional lighting, seemed to mirror the cold pragmatism that had characterized their discussion of my potential death as a business opportunity, rather than a personal loss that would diminish their lives in meaningful ways. Dr. Williams arrived for her morning rounds with characteristic professional efficiency, reviewing my chart and conducting physical examinations that confirmed my recovery was progressing according to expected timelines. Her medical optimism about my healing process contrasted sharply with my emotional state, which had deteriorated significantly since overhearing the conversation that had revealed my family's true priorities and motivations. "Your physical recovery is exceeding our initial projections," Dr. Williams reported with genuine satisfaction. "The internal bleeding has stopped completely, your fractured ribs are healing properly, and the neurological concerns from your concussion have resolved better than we anticipated. We should be able to transfer you to a standard recovery room this afternoon, which represents significant progress toward eventual discharge. The prospect of leaving intensive care meant increased opportunities for family visits and interactions that I now understood would be motivated by inheritance concerns rather than genuine affection for my well-being. The knowledge that their expressions of love and support were strategic performances designed to influence my estate planning decisions created a cynicism about human relationships that I had never experienced previously. My professional responsibilities at Prometheus Medical Technologies provided a welcome distraction from family relationship analysis. My engineering team had been remarkably supportive throughout my hospitalization, with colleagues taking responsibility for critical project deadlines and ensuring that client relationships remained stable during my absence. The contrast between their professional loyalty and my family's financial opportunism highlighted the difference between relationships based on mutual respect versus those founded on transactional calculations. The text messages and emails from my Prometheus colleagues demonstrated genuine concern for my recovery without any underlying agenda related to personal benefit. My project manager, Jennifer Walsh, had coordinated coverage for my responsibilities, while also ensuring that I received regular updates about developments that might affect my return to work. Her messages contained professional updates alongside personal encouragement that reflected authentic friendship rather than strategic positioning. The cardiac monitoring device project has received preliminary FDA approval for the next phase of testing, Jennifer had written in her latest update. The entire team is excited about moving forward, but we are more focused on ensuring you have whatever time and support you need for complete recovery. Your innovative engineering work made this approval possible, and we want you healthy and ready to lead us through the final development stages when you return. The financial implications of my medical leave had been addressed through Prometheus Medical Technologies, comprehensive disability benefits, and sick leave policies that ensured my income would continue uninterrupted throughout my recovery period. Additionally, the stock options that had accumulated through my 8-year tenure with the company continued to increase in value as acquisition discussions progressed with larger medical technology corporations. Recent communications from the company's financial advisors had indicated that my equity position could potentially be worth between $3 and $5 million if pending acquisition negotiations reached successful completion. This financial security meant that my family's dependence on my income represented choice rather than necessity, making their inheritance planning discussions even more troubling in their implications about our relationships. The realization that I possessed sufficient resources to achieve complete financial independence from family obligations created opportunities for fundamental changes in how I structured my personal relationships and professional commitments. The accident had inadvertently provided clarity about which relationships deserved continued investment and which connections had been maintained through obligation rather than authentic affection. Marcus remained unreachable through standard military communication channels, a situation that had previously generated anxiety but now seemed providential, given my need for time to process recent discoveries, without the additional complexity of explaining family dynamics that I was still struggling to understand myself. The military liaison officer had indicated that notification procedures for family emergencies were progressing through appropriate channels, but operational security requirements prevented specific timelines for when communication would become possible. The prospect of eventually discussing my family's inheritance planning with Marcus raised questions about how to explain relationships that I had previously described in positive terms, but now understood to be fundamentally different from my original perceptions. His military experience with trust and loyalty in high-stakes situations would likely provide valuable perspective on distinguishing between authentic relationships and strategic alliances disguised as emotional connections. My afternoon transfer from intensive care to a standard recovery room marked a significant milestone in my physical healing, while also representing increased vulnerability to family visits that would now carry entirely different emotional stakes. The new room offered greater privacy and comfort, but it also eliminated the protective barriers that had limited access during the critical phase of my recovery. The nursing staff in the recovery unit maintained the same level of professional excellence that had characterized my intensive care experience, ensuring that pain management protocols continued effectively while gradually reducing my dependence on medication that had affected my cognitive clarity. The improvement in mental acuity made it easier to analyze my situation objectively, while also making the emotional impact of recent discoveries more acute and difficult to manage. Dr. Williams had scheduled my discharge for the following week, pending continued improvement in my mobility and confirmation that my home environment would provide adequate support for the remainder of my recovery period. The prospect of returning to my Coronado townhouse raised practical questions about how to manage daily activities with limited physical capabilities, while also providing opportunities for privacy and reflection that hospital settings could not offer. The financial aspects of my medical care had been addressed through my comprehensive health insurance coverage, which included provisions for extended recovery periods and physical therapy services that would facilitate my return to full functionality. The contrast between my secure medical benefits and my family's apparent concerns about accessing my financial resources highlighted the difference between genuine security planning and opportunistic inheritance calculations. Late afternoon brought the arrival of my family members for their first visit since my transfer to the recovery unit. Their expressions of relief and affection carried new meaning, now that I understood their underlying concerns about my financial assets and estate planning arrangements. The warmth in their voices seemed calculated rather than spontaneous, designed to reinforce their claims on my loyalty and resources, rather than expressing authentic joy about my improving health. My mother approached my bedside with tears in her eyes that might have previously moved me to emotional response, but now seemed like performance art designed to reinforce her maternal role and strengthen her position in inheritance discussions. Her gentle touch on my hand felt manipulative rather than comforting, a strategic gesture intended to remind me of family bonds that obligated continued financial support. "We have been so worried about you, Victoria," my mother said with trembling voice that seemed rehearsed rather than spontaneous. "The doctors say you are recovering well, but we want to make sure you have everything you need for complete healing. Family support is so important during times like these, and we want you to know that we are here for whatever you need." My father's contribution to the conversation focused immediately on practical arrangements and future planning in ways that seemed designed to introduce inheritance discussions without appearing overtly mercenary. His medical background provided credibility for questions about my long-term prognosis and recovery timeline that served as foundation for financial planning conversations. The trauma surgeon mentioned that your injuries could have been much more serious if the accident had occurred differently, my father observed with clinical detachment. This experience should remind all of us about the importance of proper estate planning and ensuring that our families are protected if unexpected events occur. Have you given any thought to updating your insurance beneficiaries or reviewing your financial arrangements? Amanda's presence beside my hospital bed carried emotional weight that had previously represented sisterly affection, but now seemed like strategic positioning for inheritance advocacy. Her artistic sensitivity, which I had always admired and supported financially, now appeared to be employed for manipulation rather than creative expression. "I have been thinking about how much you have sacrificed for our family over the years," Amanda said with apparent sincerity that now struck me as calculated performance. "You have supported my art career and helped Kevin with his business ventures, always putting family needs ahead of your own desires. If something serious had happened to you, we would want to honor that legacy by continuing to support each other the way you have always supported us." Kevin's contribution to the conversation revealed his characteristic blend of optimism and entitlement, but now these qualities seemed focused on inheritance planning rather than expressing genuine concern for my welfare. His entrepreneurial failures had apparently taught him to view family resources as collective assets rather than individual achievements that carried personal obligations. "This accident has made me realize how much our family depends on your financial stability," Kevin said with transparency that might have been refreshing if it had not followed their private inheritance discussions. "Maybe we should talk about formalizing some of the financial arrangements that have been informal up to this point. If your condition had been worse, we would have needed clearer understanding about how to access resources for your care and our continued support." The conversation continued with increasingly direct references to estate planning, insurance policies, and beneficiary designations that revealed their shared assumption that my recovery provided an opportunity to secure their financial interests rather than simply celebrating my survival. Their questions about my stock options, retirement accounts, and life insurance coverage were presented as family planning discussions, but clearly reflected their private inheritance calculations. My responses to their inquiries were deliberately non-committal, citing fatigue and medication effects as reasons for postponing detailed financial discussions until my recovery was more complete. This strategy provided time for careful consideration of how to address their expectations while protecting my own interests and honoring authentic relationships rather than transactional obligations. The emotional impact of this family visit confirmed my worst fears about their motivations, while also clarifying the path forward for restructuring my personal relationships according to principles of mutual respect rather than financial dependence. The contrast between their public expressions of love and their private inheritance planning had revealed truths that demanded fundamental changes in how I approached family obligations and personal boundaries. As visiting hours concluded and my family departed with promises to return the following day, I found myself experiencing unexpected relief at their absence rather than the loneliness that had characterized previous separations. The prospect of Marcus's eventual return from deployment now represented hope for authentic connection rather than simply reunion with my spouse, because his loyalty had never been compromised by calculations about my financial value or inheritance potential. The clarity that emerged from my family's transparent inheritance discussions brought unexpected freedom alongside the emotional devastation of understanding their true priorities. For the first time in my adult life, I possessed complete information about relationships that had previously operated under assumptions and obligations that obscured their fundamental nature. This knowledge, while painful, provided the foundation for making decisions based on reality rather than wishful thinking about family bonds that had never actually existed. My third morning in the recovery unit began with Dr. Williams delivering news that accelerated both my physical healing timeline and my need to develop concrete plans for addressing my changed family circumstances. The medical team had concluded that my recovery was progressing exceptionally well, with all major concerns resolved and most restrictions lifted earlier than originally projected. "Your body has responded remarkably well to treatment," Dr. Williams explained with genuine satisfaction in her professional assessment. "The internal injuries have healed completely, your neurological function has returned to normal parameters, and your mobility is improving ahead of schedule. We can proceed with discharge planning for this weekend, provided you have adequate support systems in place for your continued recovery at home." The question of support systems carried new complexity given my recent discoveries about family motivations and the ongoing uncertainty about Marcus's deployment status. However, my professional network at Prometheus Medical Technologies had already demonstrated their willingness to provide practical assistance that was motivated by genuine concern rather than inheritance considerations. Jennifer Walsh had coordinated a comprehensive support plan that included meal delivery services, transportation assistance for medical appointments, and flexible work arrangements that would allow me to gradually resume my engineering responsibilities from home before returning to full office duties. Her organizational skills and authentic friendship had created a safety net that eliminated my dependence on family members whose help now came with strings attached to estate planning discussions. The financial resources available through my position at Prometheus provided additional security that made family financial support unnecessary for my recovery period. My disability benefits covered all medical expenses while maintaining my full salary, and the company's flexible work policies meant that I could begin contributing to projects remotely as soon as my energy levels permitted sustained concentration. The stock options that represented my most significant financial asset continued to appreciate in value as acquisition negotiations progressed between Prometheus Medical Technologies and larger medical device corporations. Recent updates from the company's financial advisors indicated that my equity position could potentially exceed $5 million if pending deals reached successful completion within the projected timeline. This financial independence provided unprecedented freedom to restructure my personal relationships according to principles of mutual respect and authentic affection, rather than obligation and dependence. The realization that I possessed sufficient resources to support myself completely meant that family relationships could be evaluated purely on their emotional merit rather than practical necessity. My analysis of family dynamics revealed patterns that extended far beyond recent inheritance discussions to encompass years of subtle manipulation and strategic positioning that I had previously interpreted as normal family interaction. Amanda's requests for financial support had always been accompanied by emotional appeals that emphasized family loyalty and shared sacrifice, while Kevin's entrepreneurial failures had been presented as temporary setbacks that required collective family investment rather than individual accountability. My parents had employed more sophisticated approaches to financial extraction, using cultural expectations about filial duty and generational responsibility to establish ongoing support arrangements that they treated as entitlements rather than gifts. Their references to retirement planning and medical expenses had created implicit obligations that I had accepted without questioning whether their financial needs were genuine or simply convenient methods for accessing my income. The pattern of family financial dependence had developed gradually over years through small requests and modest contributions that had grown into substantial monthly transfers without formal acknowledgement or appreciation. My willingness to provide support had been interpreted as evidence that my resources belonged to the family collectively rather than to me individually, creating expectations that my success obligated continued sacrifice for their benefit. The hospital's patient services department had provided information about estate planning and financial planning resources that could help me develop strategies for protecting my assets, while ensuring that my authentic relationships received appropriate consideration. The contrast between professional financial advice and family inheritance pressure highlighted the difference between objective planning and emotional manipulation. My laptop, retrieved from my damaged vehicle and still functional despite the accident, provided access to my financial accounts and legal documents that had previously been managed through arrangements that prioritized convenience over security. The review of my current beneficiary designations revealed that most of my assets would transfer to Marcus as my spouse, with secondary beneficiaries including my parents and siblings in arrangements that reflected my previous assumptions about family loyalty. The knowledge that my family viewed these beneficiary designations as problems to be solved rather than expressions of my personal preferences confirmed that their inheritance concerns were focused on personal benefit rather than honoring my wishes or supporting my chosen relationships. Their private discussions had revealed their assumption that Marcus did not deserve access to resources that they considered family property regardless of legal ownership or marital commitment. My decision to revise my estate planning arrangements emerged from careful consideration of which relationships had demonstrated authentic loyalty versus strategic positioning throughout my adult life. The contrast between my family's inheritance calculations and Marcus's consistent support despite deployment challenges made the choice straightforward, even though implementing changes would require navigation of complex family dynamics and potential emotional confrontation. The practical aspects of estate planning revision required consultation with legal professionals who specialized in military family financial arrangements and asset protection strategies. The hospital's social services department had provided referrals to attorneys who understood the unique considerations that applied to military spouses with substantial personal assets and complex family relationships. My initial consultation with estate planning attorney Michael Chen, conducted via video conference from my hospital room, revealed options for structuring my financial arrangements that would honor authentic relationships while protecting my assets from manipulation or unwarranted claims. His expertise in military family law provided valuable perspective on ensuring that deployment schedules and communication limitations would not compromise my ability to make independent financial decisions. Military spouses often face unique pressures regarding estate planning, particularly when their personal assets exceed their family's previous experience with financial management, Attorney Chen explained during our consultation. Your situation requires careful consideration of both legal protections and relationship dynamics to ensure that your wishes are honored regardless of external pressure or family expectations. The legal framework for revising my beneficiary designations proved straightforward from a procedural perspective, but Attorney Chen emphasized the importance of documenting my decision-making process to protect against future challenges based on claims of undue influence or diminished capacity during my recovery period. His recommendations included detailed written explanations of my reasoning and independent medical confirmation of my cognitive capability. The emotional preparation for implementing these changes required psychological resources that extended beyond my previous experience with family conflict. The prospect of definitively prioritizing Marcus and other authentic relationships over family members who had supported me throughout my life, despite their recent revelation of ulterior motives, demanded courage that challenged my deepest assumptions about loyalty and obligation. My reflections on family relationships revealed that my financial support had never generated genuine appreciation or strengthened emotional bonds, but had instead created entitlement and resentment when my contributions were perceived as insufficient for their expanding expectations. The pattern of increasing demands and decreasing gratitude, suggested that continued financial support would perpetuate rather than resolve the fundamental problems in our relationships. The contrast between family members who viewed my success as their opportunity and colleagues who celebrated my achievements without expecting personal benefit highlighted the difference between relationships based on mutual respect versus those founded on exploitation. My engineering team at Prometheus had consistently supported my professional development and personal goals, without any expectation of financial reward or inheritance consideration. The military community that had provided framework for my relationship with Marcus operated according to principles of loyalty and sacrifice that transcended financial calculations and personal convenience. The bonds formed through shared commitment to service and mutual support during challenging deployments had proven more reliable than family connections based on genetic relationship and cultural obligation. My decision to prioritize authentic relationships over traditional family obligations represented a fundamental shift in personal philosophy that extended beyond estate planning to encompass all aspects of how I evaluated and invested in human connections. The criteria for deserving my trust and support would focus on demonstrated loyalty rather than claimed entitlement, and on mutual respect rather than assumed obligation. The practical implementation of my revised estate planning began with comprehensive documentation of my current financial position and clear instructions for asset distribution that reflected my authentic preferences rather than family expectations. The process required detailed consideration of various scenarios and contingencies to ensure that my wishes would be honored regardless of future circumstances or external pressure. Attorney Chen had recommended establishing a trust structure that would provide additional protection for my assets, while ensuring that Marcus and other deserving beneficiaries would receive appropriate support according to my intentions, rather than legal default arrangements that might not reflect my personal values and relationship priorities. The trust arrangements would also include provisions for charitable giving that reflected my commitment to supporting causes that aligned with my professional expertise in medical device development and my personal values regarding service and community contribution. These charitable components would ensure that my resources created positive impact beyond personal relationships, while also protecting assets from family members whose priorities focused on personal consumption rather than meaningful contribution. The completion of revised estate planning documents would require Marcus's input and agreement regarding our shared financial future, conversations that would need to occur after his return from deployment, and full understanding of the family dynamics that had shaped my recent decisions. The prospect of sharing these discoveries with him generated both anticipation and anxiety about how our relationship might be affected by knowledge of my family's true priorities and my response to their inheritance planning. The transformation of my family relationships from sources of obligation to opportunities for authentic connection required establishing clear boundaries regarding financial support and personal involvement that would protect my emotional well-being, while leaving room for potential future reconciliation based on genuine change rather than strategic positioning for inheritance benefit. The discharge process from UC San Diego Medical Center proceeded with remarkable efficiency, reflecting both my accelerated physical recovery and the comprehensive support arrangements that had been established through my professional network rather than family assistance. Dr. Williams completed her final medical evaluation with evident satisfaction regarding my healing progress and confidence in my ability to manage the remaining recovery period from home with appropriate medical supervision and physical therapy support. My return to the Coronado townhouse represented more than simple geographical transition from hospital to home environment. The familiar surroundings carried new significance as the first location where I would implement the financial and personal relationship changes that had emerged from my hospital revelations about family priorities and authentic loyalty. The physical space that had previously served as neutral territory for family gatherings would now become the setting for establishing boundaries that reflected my evolved understanding of which relationships deserved continued investment and support. The practical arrangements for my home recovery had been coordinated entirely through professional relationships that operated according to principles of mutual respect rather than inheritance expectations. Jennifer Walsh had organized meal delivery services from local restaurants, arranged for weekly housekeeping assistance, and established a rotating schedule of colleague visits that would provide social interaction without the emotional complexity that now characterized family relationships. The financial security provided through my position at Prometheus Medical Technologies eliminated any practical dependence on family assistance during my recovery period. My disability benefits continued at full salary levels, while medical expenses were covered completely through comprehensive health insurance that included provisions for extended physical therapy and specialized medical equipment that facilitated home recovery. The revised estate planning documents that Attorney Chen had prepared during my hospitalization reflected my commitment to prioritizing authentic relationships over traditional family obligations. The comprehensive trust structure protected my assets while ensuring that Marcus would receive primary consideration as my chosen life partner, with secondary provisions for charitable giving that supported medical research and military family assistance programs, rather than family members whose concern for my welfare appeared to correlate directly with their inheritance expectations. My analysis of family financial dependency patterns had revealed the extent to which my income had been supporting lifestyle choices rather than genuine necessities. Amanda's art career benefited from my financial contributions but remained viable through other income sources when necessary. Kevin's entrepreneurial ventures had consistently failed regardless of family financial support, suggesting that continued investment would perpetuate poor decision-making rather than facilitate eventual success. My parents possessed sufficient retirement resources and Social Security benefits to maintain their standard of living without supplemental income from my salary. The decision to discontinue regular financial transfers to family members represented a fundamental shift from obligation-based giving to relationship-based support that required demonstration of genuine appreciation and reciprocal consideration rather than assumed entitlement. This change would test whether family relationships could survive without the financial incentives that had apparently motivated much of their previous attention and affection. The morning of my third day home brought unexpected developments that would accelerate the timeline for addressing family dynamics and implementing relationship boundaries. The secure communication device that Marcus used for emergency contact during deployments activated with an incoming message that indicated his mission status had changed, and his return timeline had been significantly abbreviated due to family emergency protocols. The message was characteristically brief due to operational security requirements, but it conveyed essential information about his awareness of my accident and his efforts to arrange emergency leave that would enable his return within days, rather than the weeks or months that normal deployment schedules would have required. The prospect of his imminent arrival generated relief that extended beyond simple reunion to encompass anticipation of sharing recent discoveries with someone whose loyalty had never been compromised by financial calculations. Marcus possessed unique qualifications for understanding the psychological impact of discovering that trusted relationships were based on strategic considerations rather than authentic affection. His military experience with intelligence gathering and threat assessment provided perspective on distinguishing between genuine loyalty and opportunistic positioning that civilian relationships rarely required, but which had proven essential for evaluating my family dynamics. The afternoon brought an unscheduled visit from my parents and siblings that appeared designed to address estate planning concerns before my complete physical recovery eliminated their rationale for discussing inheritance arrangements. Their coordinated arrival and prepared talking points suggested strategic planning that confirmed their view of my accident as an opportunity for securing financial advantages rather than simply supporting my healing process. My mother approached the conversation with emotional appeals that emphasized family unity and shared responsibility for ensuring everyone's security and well-being. Her presentation of inheritance planning as expressions of love and consideration for family welfare demonstrated sophisticated manipulation techniques that I had not previously recognized as strategic behavior, rather than genuine maternal concern. Victoria, we have been thinking about the important conversations we need to have as a family following your accident. My mother began with apparent sincerity that now struck me as performance designed to establish emotional foundation for financial discussions. This experience has reminded us how precious life is and how important it is to ensure that our family relationships are structured to provide security and support for everyone we love. My father contributed medical credibility to their inheritance advocacy by referencing professional experience with families who had faced similar health crises without adequate estate planning preparation. His clinical approach to family financial arrangements presented inheritance discussions as prudent planning rather than opportunistic positioning that prioritized their interests over my autonomous decision-making. As a physician, I have seen numerous situations where families faced financial hardship because estate planning failed to consider the needs of all dependent family members. My father explained with professional authority that was intended to validate their inheritance concerns. Your accident could have had much more serious consequences, and we want to ensure that your financial arrangements reflect your commitment to supporting the family members who have always depended on your help. Amanda's contribution to their presentation focused on emotional appeals that emphasized the artistic and cultural contributions that my financial support had enabled throughout her career. Her argument for continued inheritance consideration was based on the premise that my resources should perpetuate the creative work that my previous support had made possible rather than simply transferring to Marcus, who allegedly lacked appreciation for artistic endeavors and cultural development. You have always believed in my art and supported my creative vision when no one else understood its value, Amanda said with apparent gratitude that was undermined by her underlying assumption that this support created obligation for continued financial commitment beyond my lifetime. If your assets go to Marcus instead of supporting the family members whose dreams you have been nurturing, it would feel like abandoning everything we have built together through your generosity. Kevin's approach to inheritance advocacy reflected his characteristic blend of optimism and entitlement, presenting his continued financial dependence as temporary necessity that would eventually generate returns that justified ongoing family investment. His argument for inheritance consideration was based on entrepreneurial potential rather than demonstrated success, requiring continued faith in business ventures that had consistently failed despite previous financial support. I know my business ventures have not been successful yet, but I am learning from each experience and developing better strategies for the next opportunity, Kevin explained with confidence that appeared to ignore the pattern of repeated failures that had characterized his entrepreneurial efforts. If your inheritance supports my continued development as an entrepreneur, eventually my success would benefit the entire family and honor your investment in my potential. The collective presentation of their inheritance arguments revealed coordination and preparation that confirmed their view of my accident as a strategic opportunity rather than a family crisis that required emotional support and practical assistance. Their focus on financial arrangements rather than health concerns demonstrated priorities that validated my decision to restructure relationships according to demonstrated loyalty rather than assumed family obligations. My response to their inheritance advocacy was deliberately non-committal, citing continued fatigue and medication effects as reasons for postponing detailed estate planning discussions until my recovery was more complete. This approach provided time for Marcus's return and his input regarding financial arrangements, while avoiding premature confrontation that might escalate family conflict, before I had developed comprehensive strategies for managing their expectations and demands. I appreciate your concern about estate planning, but I need to focus on physical recovery before making important financial decisions, I replied with diplomatic language that acknowledged their stated concern while deflecting pressure for immediate commitment to their inheritance preferences. When Marcus returns from deployment, we will review all our financial arrangements together and ensure that our estate planning reflects our shared values and priorities. The mention of Marcus's involvement in estate planning decisions generated visible disappointment among my family members, confirming that their inheritance advocacy was motivated by concern that his influence would diminish their access to my financial resources. Their reaction to his potential role in financial planning revealed the extent to which they viewed my marriage as obstacle to their inheritance expectations, rather than as legitimate partnership that deserved primary consideration in my personal decision-making. The conversation concluded with expressions of continued concern for my recovery that were accompanied by subtle pressure for reconsideration of their inheritance arguments. Their departure was marked by promises to return for continued discussion once I felt more capable of addressing important family planning decisions, language that confirmed their intention to maintain pressure until their financial interests were secured through formal estate planning changes. The evening hours following their visit provided opportunity for reflection on the contrast between their strategic family planning presentation and the authentic concern that Marcus had demonstrated through his efforts to arrange emergency leave despite operational complications and security restrictions. The difference between manipulation designed to secure inheritance advantages and genuine love that prioritized my welfare over personal convenience had become unmistakably clear through recent experiences. The prospect of Marcus's imminent return generated anticipation that extended beyond simple reunion to encompass shared decision-making about relationships and financial arrangements that would reflect our mutual commitment rather than external family pressure. His military experience with loyalty and sacrifice under challenging circumstances provided foundation for discussions about authentic relationships versus strategic alliances that civilian environments rarely required, but which had proven essential for evaluating my family dynamics. The transformation of my understanding about family relationships from sources of obligation to opportunities for authentic connection had created freedom to restructure personal commitments according to demonstrated loyalty rather than assumed entitlement. The knowledge that my financial independence eliminated practical dependence on family approval or support provided unprecedented autonomy for making decisions based on genuine affection and mutual respect, rather than cultural expectations and traditional obligations. The sound of Marcus's key in the front door arrived 3 days earlier than his most optimistic projected return timeline, testament to his exceptional ability to navigate military bureaucracy and operational logistics when family emergencies demanded immediate action. His arrival carried the familiar weight of tactical gear and deployment equipment, but his physical presence filled the townhouse with an energy that had been absent throughout my recovery period and family relationship revelations. Marcus had managed to secure emergency leave through a combination of his exemplary service record and the severity of my medical situation, though the abbreviated deployment timeline meant that his unit would continue their mission without his participation for the remaining operational period. The sacrifice of professional advancement and mission completion for family emergency demonstrated priorities that contrasted sharply with my family's focus on inheritance planning rather than genuine concern for my welfare. His immediate assessment of my physical condition reflected both his medical training as a special operations medic and his personal investment in my complete recovery. The systematic evaluation of my mobility, pain levels, and healing progress proceeded with professional thoroughness while also conveying emotional relief that transcended clinical interest in medical outcomes. The doctors did excellent work, but you are healing faster than most people would expect from injuries this severe, Marcus observed with satisfaction that combined medical knowledge with personal gratitude. Your commitment to physical fitness and disciplined recovery approach has accelerated the timeline significantly. How are you managing the psychological aspects of the trauma and extended recovery period? His question about psychological recovery created an opening for discussing discoveries that extended far beyond physical healing to encompass fundamental revelations about family relationships and personal priorities. The prospect of sharing recent insights with someone whose loyalty had never been compromised by financial calculations generated both relief and apprehension about how these revelations might affect our marriage and future planning. The conversation about my family's inheritance discussions required careful presentation of events and discoveries that challenged assumptions Marcus had maintained about my family relationships throughout our marriage. His previous interactions with my parents and siblings had been limited due to deployment schedules and cultural differences, but he had respected my descriptions of family bonds and financial support arrangements without questioning underlying motivations or relationship dynamics. Marcus listened to my account of the overheard inheritance planning conversation with the focused attention that characterized his approach to intelligence briefings and threat assessments. His military experience with deception and manipulation provided framework for understanding family dynamics that civilian relationship models might not adequately address. Intelligence analysis teaches you that stated motivations rarely align perfectly with actual priorities, Marcus replied after I had completed my description of family inheritance discussions. The fact that they viewed your potential death as a financial opportunity rather than a personal loss reveals their true relationship priorities. Military families understand that authentic loyalty extends beyond strategic benefit to encompass genuine sacrifice for others' welfare. His perspective on family manipulation tactics drew from operational experience with hostile interrogation and psychological warfare techniques that employed emotional appeals and relationship leverage to achieve strategic objectives. The comparison between family inheritance pressure and enemy influence operations provided valuable framework for understanding the systematic nature of their approach to securing financial advantages. Your family's coordinated presentation of inheritance arguments demonstrates sophisticated planning that prioritizes their collective interests over your autonomous decision-making. Marcus analyzed with clinical objectivity that helped separate emotional impact from strategic assessment. The timing of their advocacy during your vulnerable recovery period suggests awareness that their financial claims lack merit under normal circumstances and require crisis leverage for successful implementation. The discussion of my revised estate planning decisions generated Marcus's complete support for prioritizing authentic relationships over traditional family obligations. His military experience with making life and death decisions based on demonstrated loyalty rather than assumed trust provided perspective on the importance of ensuring that personal assets supported individuals who had proven their commitment through action rather than claiming entitlement through relationship status. Military operational planning requires constant evaluation of personnel reliability based on demonstrated performance rather than stated commitment. Marcus explained as framework for understanding my family relationship analysis. Your family's inheritance discussions during your medical crisis revealed their actual priorities when they believed their statements would remain private. This intelligence provides essential information for making informed decisions about future relationship investment and financial arrangements. The practical aspects of implementing estate planning changes that reflected authentic relationship priorities rather than family expectations required coordination between Marcus and me regarding our shared financial future and mutual commitment to supporting deserving individuals and causes. His deployment income and military benefits combined with my Prometheus Medical Technologies compensation and stock options created substantial joint resources that demanded careful stewardship according to our shared values. Marcus's reaction to learning about my family's financial dependence on my income revealed his perspective on relationship balance and reciprocal support that had been shaped by military partnership principles. His expectation that authentic relationships involved mutual sacrifice and shared responsibility contrasted with family dynamics that had evolved into one-directional financial support, without corresponding consideration for my personal needs or professional goals. Effective military partnerships require each member to contribute according to their capabilities, while also supporting others when circumstances demand sacrifice, Marcus observed regarding family financial arrangements. Your family's expectation that your success obligates continued support without reciprocal consideration for your welfare represents exploitation rather than authentic relationship. Healthy partnerships involve mutual investment rather than unilateral extraction. The afternoon brought an unscheduled visit from my family members who appeared surprised and concerned by Marcus's unexpected presence in our home. Their coordinated arrival suggested continued coordination regarding inheritance advocacy, but Marcus's presence complicated their strategic approach to securing financial commitments, before my complete recovery eliminated their rationale for emergency estate planning discussions. My mother's greeting to Marcus carried polite formality that barely concealed her disappointment at his early return from deployment. Her expectation that his absence would facilitate inheritance planning without his input or influence had been disrupted by his successful navigation of military emergency leave procedures and his commitment to supporting my recovery period personally rather than depending on family assistance. "Marcus, we did not expect you to return so soon from your deployment," my mother observed with diplomatic language that failed to mask her strategic disappointment. "We have been discussing important family planning matters with Victoria, and we were hoping to reach some preliminary agreements before adding complexity that outside perspectives might introduce to our family decision-making process." Marcus's response to family inheritance pressure demonstrated the diplomatic skills that special operations personnel develop for managing hostile environments while maintaining operational security and strategic advantage. His acknowledgement of their stated concern for family welfare was accompanied by clear assertion of his primary role in my personal and financial decision-making as my spouse and chosen life partner. "I appreciate your concern for Victoria's welfare during her recovery period," Marcus replied with professional courtesy that established boundaries without creating unnecessary confrontation. "As her husband, I am committed to ensuring that all important decisions reflect our shared values and mutual priorities, rather than external pressure or family expectations that might not align with our personal goals and relationship commitments." The conversation that followed revealed the fundamental conflict between family inheritance expectations and marital financial planning that prioritized authentic partnership over traditional obligations. My father's attempt to establish medical authority for family involvement in estate planning decisions was countered by Marcus's assertion of spousal rights and his own medical training that qualified him to assess my decision-making capacity and recovery progress. As Victoria's father and a practicing physician, I believe I have both personal and professional insight into the family considerations that should influence her estate planning decisions. My father stated with authority that was intended to establish his credibility for inheritance advocacy. Military spouses often lack understanding of family dynamics and cultural obligations that have developed over decades of shared experience and mutual support. Marcus's response drew from his special operations experience with cultural intelligence and cross-cultural relationship dynamics to address family expectations while maintaining respect for our autonomous decision-making authority. His acknowledgement of family cultural background was balanced with assertion of our right to establish priorities that reflected our personal values rather than traditional obligations. I respect the cultural and family relationships that have shaped Victoria's background, but military service has taught me that authentic loyalty transcends cultural expectations to focus on demonstrated commitment and mutual sacrifice. Marcus replied with diplomatic firmness. Our marriage represents our mutual choice to prioritize each other's welfare over external obligations, including family expectations that might conflict with our shared goals and values. Amanda's contribution to the inheritance discussion focused on emotional appeals that emphasized the artistic and creative contributions that my financial support had enabled throughout her career. Her presentation of continued inheritance consideration as honor for my previous investment in her artistic development demonstrated strategic thinking that Marcus immediately recognized as manipulation technique, rather than genuine gratitude. Victoria has always supported my artistic vision and creative development, when other family members questioned the value of pursuing art as a career. Amanda explained with apparent sincerity that was designed to reinforce her claim on my continued financial support. If her estate planning eliminates family consideration in favor of Marcus, it would feel like abandoning the creative projects and artistic community that her generosity has been nurturing for years. Marcus's analysis of Amanda's inheritance advocacy revealed his understanding of psychological manipulation tactics that employed emotional leverage and guilt induction to achieve strategic objectives. His military experience with resistance to enemy influence operations provided framework for recognizing and countering similar techniques in civilian relationship contexts. Appreciation for past support should not create perpetual obligation for continued financial assistance, particularly when that assistance has not generated corresponding concern for Victoria's personal welfare or relationship priorities. Marcus observed with clarity that exposed the fundamental weakness in Amanda's inheritance arguments. Authentic gratitude focuses on honoring the giver's autonomy rather than securing continued benefit for the recipient. Kevin's approach to inheritance advocacy reflected his characteristic optimism regarding entrepreneurial potential combined with expectation that family resources should support his continued business ventures, despite their consistent failure to generate positive returns. His presentation of inheritance consideration as investment in family financial future demonstrated misunderstanding of both investment principles and authentic relationship obligations. My business experience has been providing valuable learning that will eventually generate returns for the entire family. Kevin explained with confidence that ignored the pattern of repeated failures that had characterized his entrepreneurial efforts. Victoria's estate planning should consider the potential for my eventual success to benefit everyone, rather than simply transferring resources to Marcus, who lacks business experience and entrepreneurial vision. Marcus's response to Kevin's inheritance claims drew from his military experience with resource allocation and strategic planning to address the fundamental flaws in expecting continued investment without demonstrated competence or accountability for previous failures. His analysis focused on the difference between supporting potential versus rewarding performance. Military resource allocation requires demonstrated competence and strategic value rather than optimistic projections about future potential. Marcus replied with professional assessment that exposed the weakness of Kevin's inheritance arguments. Continued financial support for ventures that have consistently failed represents poor resource management rather than family loyalty or investment in realistic business potential. The family's collective response to Marcus's systematic dismantling of their inheritance arguments revealed their frustration with his analytical approach and his refusal to accept emotional manipulation or guilt induction as valid basis for estate planning decisions. Their coordination began to deteriorate as individual arguments were addressed methodically rather than being accepted based on assumed family obligation. The conversation concluded with my family's recognition that Marcus's presence and analytical capabilities had fundamentally altered the strategic environment for their inheritance advocacy. Their departure was marked by expressions of disappointment, rather than continued concern for my welfare, confirming that their primary motivation involved financial benefit rather than genuine family relationship maintenance. The departure of my family members following their unsuccessful inheritance advocacy marked the beginning of a period that would test the fundamental strength of relationships that had been built through decades of shared experience, but had never been evaluated according to principles of authentic loyalty and mutual respect. Their visible frustration with Marcus's analytical dismantling of their financial arguments had revealed the extent to which their concern for my welfare had been contingent upon their ability to secure inheritance advantages, rather than genuine investment in my recovery and long-term happiness. Marcus's presence in our home during the crucial days following his return from deployment provided stability and perspective that enabled objective analysis of family dynamics without the emotional manipulation that had previously clouded my understanding of these relationships. His military training in intelligence assessment and threat evaluation offered frameworks for distinguishing between stated motivations and actual priorities that civilian relationship models often failed to address adequately. The morning after the confrontational family visit brought communication from my parents that revealed their strategic response to losing immediate inheritance leverage through Marcus's early return and analytical intervention. Their coordinated text messages and voicemails demonstrated continued coordination in their approach to securing financial advantages, but their tactics had shifted from direct advocacy to indirect pressure, designed to exploit emotional vulnerabilities that they assumed would override rational decision-making. My mother's voicemail carried emotional weight that previous experience had trained me to interpret as maternal concern, but which I now recognized as sophisticated manipulation designed to generate guilt about prioritizing marital relationships over family obligations. Her message emphasized disappointment rather than anger, presenting my resistance to their inheritance planning as personal betrayal rather than autonomous decision-making based on legitimate relationship priorities. Victoria, I am deeply hurt by yesterday's conversation and the way our family planning discussion was handled. My mother's message began with carefully modulated disappointment that was intended to generate emotional response rather than rational analysis. We have always been a close family that supports each other through difficult times, and I cannot understand why you would allow outside influence to damage the relationships that have sustained us throughout our lives together. My father's communication approach reflected his medical background and professional authority, presenting continued resistance to family inheritance planning as evidence of compromised judgment due to accident trauma and recovery medication effects. His suggestion that my decision-making capacity might be temporarily impaired was designed to provide justification for delaying estate planning changes while maintaining family pressure for inheritance consideration. Your accident and recovery process may be affecting your ability to make complex financial decisions that require careful consideration of long-term family welfare. My father's message explained with clinical language that was intended to establish medical credibility for questioning my autonomous judgment. I recommend postponing any significant estate planning changes until your cognitive function has returned completely to normal baseline levels and you can evaluate family considerations without external pressure or influence. Amanda's communication strategy focused on emotional appeals that emphasized the artistic and creative relationships that my financial support had enabled throughout her career. Her presentation of inheritance planning as continuation of cultural and creative investment demonstrated sophisticated understanding of my personal values while simultaneously exploiting those values for financial advantage. I have been reflecting on all the conversations we have had about art, creativity, and the importance of supporting cultural development in our community. Amanda wrote with apparent sincerity that was designed to reinforce emotional connection while advancing inheritance arguments. Your support has enabled me to contribute to the artistic community in ways that honor our family's commitment to cultural enrichment and creative expression. I hope you will consider how your estate planning can continue that legacy rather than abandoning the projects and relationships that your generosity has been nurturing. Kevin's approach to inheritance advocacy had evolved to emphasize potential rather than demonstrated achievement, presenting continued financial support as investment in family business development that would eventually generate returns for everyone, rather than simply supporting individual consumption and lifestyle maintenance. His communication demonstrated persistent optimism regarding entrepreneurial success despite consistent evidence of poor business judgment and strategic planning. I know my previous business ventures have not achieved the success we anticipated, but each experience has provided valuable learning that is preparing me for the opportunity that will justify our family's faith in my potential. Kevin's message explained with confidence that appeared to ignore objective evidence regarding his entrepreneurial capabilities. Your estate planning represents an opportunity to ensure that the business knowledge I have been developing through your support will eventually benefit our entire family rather than being abandoned before my efforts can reach successful completion. The coordinated nature of these family communications revealed strategic planning that transcended individual relationship concerns to encompass collective financial objectives that prioritized inheritance security over authentic family bonds. Their shared assumption that emotional pressure and guilt induction would prove more effective than logical argumentation demonstrated fundamental misunderstanding of the transformation that my accident experience and Marcus's analytical support had created in my approach to relationship evaluation. Marcus's assessment of family communication tactics drew from his special operations experience with psychological warfare and influence operations to provide framework for understanding the systematic nature of their inheritance advocacy. His analysis focused on the difference between authentic emotional expression and strategic manipulation designed to achieve specific behavioral outcomes. Military intelligence training teaches recognition of influence operations that employ emotional leverage and relationship exploitation to achieve strategic objectives. Marcus explained as framework for understanding family inheritance pressure. Your family's coordinated communication strategy demonstrates sophisticated planning that prioritizes their financial interests over your emotional welfare and autonomous decision-making authority. The practical implementation of our revised estate planning proceeded with legal consultation that ensured our financial arrangements reflected authentic relationship priorities rather than external family pressure or traditional obligations that failed to account for demonstrated loyalty and mutual commitment. Attorney Chen's expertise in military family financial planning provided additional protection against inheritance challenges based on claims of undue influence or diminished capacity during recovery periods. The trust structures that had been established during my hospitalization provided comprehensive protection for our shared financial resources, while ensuring that charitable giving reflected our commitment to supporting medical research and military family assistance programs rather than subsidizing family members whose concern for our welfare appeared to correlate directly with their inheritance expectations. The completion of revised beneficiary designations for my Prometheus Medical Technologies stock options represented the most significant financial decision of our marriage, transferring potential assets worth several $1 million from family members to Marcus and charitable organizations that aligned with our shared values regarding service and community contribution. The magnitude of this financial reallocation reflected the depth of trust and commitment that had developed through our marriage despite deployment challenges and extended separations. Marcus's response to learning about the full extent of my financial assets revealed his perspective on wealth management and resource stewardship that had been shaped by military values regarding service and sacrifice rather than personal consumption and lifestyle enhancement. His commitment to using our combined resources for meaningful contribution rather than simply accumulating wealth for its own sake aligned with my professional dedication to medical device development that improved patient outcomes. Military service teaches that resources and capabilities create obligations for contributing to something larger than personal benefit, Marcus observed regarding our financial planning approach. Your success at Prometheus Medical Technologies has created opportunities for supporting medical research and military family assistance that can generate lasting positive impact beyond our individual welfare or family financial security. The charitable components of our estate planning included substantial provisions for biomedical engineering research that would advance cardiac monitoring technology development, reflecting my professional commitment to improving patient care through innovative medical device solutions. Additional charitable allocations supported military family assistance programs that addressed deployment stress and relationship challenges that Marcus had observed throughout his special operations career. The afternoon brought unexpected communication from Jennifer Walsh at Prometheus Medical Technologies regarding acquisition negotiations that had accelerated during my recovery period, creating potential for stock option valuations that exceeded previous projections by substantial margins. The timing of this financial opportunity coincided with family inheritance pressure in ways that highlighted the contrast between professional relationships based on mutual contribution and family relationships that appeared to prioritize personal extraction over collective success. The acquisition discussions have progressed more rapidly than anyone anticipated, with final agreements potentially completed within the next 60 days. Jennifer's update explained with excitement that reflected genuine professional satisfaction rather than personal financial interest. Your innovative engineering contributions to cardiac monitoring technology development have been specifically cited by the acquiring company as key intellectual property that justifies their valuation premium. We want to ensure you understand the full implications for your stock option position before any final agreements are executed. The potential for my equity position to exceed $7 million through successful acquisition completion represented financial security that eliminated any practical justification for family inheritance pressure, while also creating opportunities for charitable contribution that could generate meaningful impact on medical research and military family support. The magnitude of these resources demanded careful stewardship, according to principles that transcended personal consumption or family financial convenience. Marcus's reaction to learning about the enhanced financial projections reflected his commitment to using increased resources for expanded contribution rather than lifestyle enhancement that might compromise our fundamental values regarding service and community welfare. His military experience with leadership and responsibility provided framework for approaching wealth as opportunity for positive impact rather than personal privilege that created isolation from broader community concerns. The evening hours provided opportunity for comprehensive discussion of our shared approach to managing substantial financial resources according to values that prioritized authentic relationships and meaningful contribution over traditional family obligations and social expectations. The transformation of my understanding regarding family dynamics had created freedom to structure our financial arrangements according to demonstrated loyalty rather than assumed entitlement. Our conversation about future planning encompassed both personal relationship goals and professional commitments that would guide our approach to using financial resources for maximum positive impact. Marcus's potential transition from active military service to civilian career opportunities aligned with my continued leadership role at Prometheus Medical Technologies in ways that could create powerful collaboration between medical technology development and military family support initiatives. The realization that our combined expertise in biomedical engineering and special operations could generate innovative approaches to military medical technology and veteran healthcare support provided exciting possibilities for meaningful contribution that transcended traditional career advancement or financial accumulation. The integration of our professional capabilities with substantial financial resources created unprecedented opportunities for addressing challenges that neither military nor civilian healthcare systems had successfully solved independently. The acquisition of Prometheus Medical Technologies by MedTech Global Corporation proceeded with remarkable efficiency, reflecting the strategic value that major medical device manufacturers placed on our innovative cardiac monitoring technology and the intellectual property that my engineering team had developed over 8 years of dedicated research and development. The final acquisition terms exceeded all previous projections, establishing my stock option value at $8.4 million and creating financial independence that eliminated any remaining practical considerations regarding family financial relationships. The completion of acquisition negotiations coincided with my full physical recovery from the accident, enabling my return to active leadership responsibilities at the newly integrated company, while also providing expanded opportunities for research collaboration and technology development that aligned with my professional aspirations in biomedical engineering. The acquiring corporation had specifically requested my continued involvement in cardiac monitoring development as a condition of their acquisition agreement, demonstrating recognition of my contributions that extended beyond financial compensation to encompass professional validation and career advancement. Marcus had completed his transition from active military deployment to reserve status, enabling his establishment of a consulting practice that provided security and risk assessment services to medical technology companies and military contractors. His unique combination of special operations experience and technical expertise created immediate demand for his services, generating professional fulfillment and financial success that complemented our shared commitment to meaningful contribution rather than simply accumulating wealth for personal consumption. The integration of our professional capabilities had resulted in collaborative projects that addressed military medical technology challenges through innovative applications of civilian cardiac monitoring systems for special operations personnel and combat medics. Our combined expertise enabled development of solutions that neither military research nor civilian medical device companies had successfully achieved independently, creating professional satisfaction that transcended financial rewards through meaningful impact on military healthcare outcomes. The establishment of the Chen Martinez Foundation represented our commitment to transforming personal financial success into systematic support for biomedical research and military family assistance programs that aligned with our values regarding service and community contribution. The Foundation's initial endowment of $2 million provided sufficient resources for sustained programming while preserving our personal financial security and continued professional development opportunities. Foundation programming focused on scholarship support for military spouses pursuing biomedical engineering education, research grants for cardiac monitoring technology development in military medical applications, and counseling services for military families experiencing deployment stress and relationship challenges. These initiatives reflected our shared understanding that meaningful wealth required purposeful stewardship that addressed challenges we had personally encountered, while creating opportunities for others facing similar circumstances. The implementation of our revised estate planning had proceeded without legal challenges or family interference, establishing comprehensive protection for our shared financial resources, while ensuring that future inheritance arrangements reflected authentic relationship priorities rather than traditional family obligations. The trust structures provided additional security against potential claims or manipulation attempts, while creating mechanisms for expanded charitable giving, as our financial position continued to strengthen through professional success. My family's response to learning about the magnitude of our financial position through acquisition completion had evolved from direct inheritance advocacy to indirect pressure strategies that employed extended family members and family friends as intermediaries for continued financial appeals. Their recognition that direct manipulation had proven ineffective had prompted development of more sophisticated approaches that attempted to circumvent the boundaries we had established regarding family financial relationships. My maternal grandmother, who had previously maintained neutral positions regarding family financial arrangements, began making uncharacteristic comments about family loyalty and generational responsibility during holiday gatherings and birthday celebrations. Her sudden interest in my estate planning appeared to reflect coaching from my parents rather than independent concern about inheritance arrangements, suggesting that family inheritance advocacy had expanded to include manipulation of elderly relatives who commanded emotional authority through age and traditional respect. Victoria, your grandfather and I worked very hard to establish financial security for our children and grandchildren, my grandmother observed during a family dinner with apparent spontaneity that seemed rehearsed rather than genuine personal reflection. We always believed that family success should benefit everyone rather than creating divisions between relatives who have different opportunities and resources. I hope you will remember the importance of keeping our family together through generous sharing of whatever blessings you have received. The employment of my grandmother as an inheritance advocate demonstrated sophisticated strategic thinking that attempted to exploit my emotional attachment to family elders while presenting financial manipulation as cultural tradition and generational wisdom. The transparency of this approach provided additional evidence regarding my family's priorities while also revealing their willingness to involve vulnerable elderly relatives in financial schemes that prioritized inheritance security over authentic family relationships. Marcus's assessment of extended family involvement in inheritance pressure reflected his military experience with influence operations that employed multiple vectors of approach when direct methods failed to achieve desired objectives. His analysis focused on the systematic nature of family manipulation tactics, while providing strategies for maintaining relationship boundaries without creating unnecessary conflict with elderly relatives who might be unaware of their role in inheritance advocacy schemes. Military influence operations often employ respected authority figures to deliver messages that would be rejected if presented by obvious adversaries, Marcus explained regarding extended family involvement in inheritance pressure. Your grandmother's sudden interest in estate planning reflects coaching rather than independent concern, but responding to her manipulation requires different approaches than addressing direct family pressure because of her age and potential lack of awareness regarding the strategic nature of her involvement. The holiday season brought increased family gathering opportunities that my relatives attempted to exploit for renewed inheritance advocacy, employing celebration environments and gift-giving traditions as context for financial pressure that would be difficult to address directly without appearing to reject family unity. Their strategic use of cultural and religious occasions demonstrated sophisticated planning that attempted to use my respect for tradition and family harmony as leverage for securing financial commitments. Christmas dinner conversation included subtle references to family financial security and retirement planning that were designed to remind me of my historical role as family financial supporter, while presenting continued assistance as moral obligation rather than voluntary generosity. The integration of inheritance pressure into celebratory conversation required careful navigation to maintain holiday spirit while resisting manipulation that exploited cultural and religious values for financial advantage. My mother's Christmas toast included carefully crafted language that acknowledged my professional success, while emphasizing family contribution and shared celebration of achievements that allegedly belonged to the collective rather than individual accomplishment. Her presentation of my financial success as family achievement created implicit obligation for continued sharing while making direct rejection of inheritance claims appear selfish and ungrateful for family support throughout my career development. We are so proud of Victoria's achievements this year and grateful for the opportunities that her success has created for our entire family, my mother announced with apparent celebration that contained underlying inheritance advocacy. Her professional recognition and financial blessings remind us of the importance of family unity and shared support that has enabled all of our individual successes. We look forward to continuing our tradition of mutual assistance and generous sharing that has strengthened our family bonds throughout the years. The systematic nature of holiday inheritance pressure required coordinated response that acknowledged family celebration while maintaining boundaries regarding financial arrangements and estate planning decisions. My approach focused on expressing gratitude for family relationships while clearly establishing that professional success created personal rather than collective financial obligations, and that estate planning remained private decision-making that would not be influenced by family pressure regardless of social context. Marcus's presence during holiday gatherings provided crucial support for maintaining inheritance boundaries while participating in family celebrations that were important for preserving relationships with family members who were not directly involved in financial manipulation schemes. His diplomatic skills enabled navigation of complex social dynamics while protecting our autonomous decision-making authority and preventing erosion of estate planning boundaries through emotional pressure or cultural exploitation. The new year brought escalated family pressure that included direct challenges to my relationship with Marcus, through suggestions that my marriage was preventing me from fulfilling family obligations, and that military deployment schedules created practical problems for long-term financial planning that required family involvement for effective resolution. These attacks on my marriage represented significant escalation in inheritance advocacy that attempted to undermine the foundation of my autonomous decision-making by questioning the stability and appropriateness of my chosen life partnership. Amanda's contribution to marriage criticism focused on cultural considerations and lifestyle compatibility, suggesting that Marcus's military background created fundamental differences in values and priorities that made him unsuitable for managing substantial financial resources or understanding family cultural traditions that should influence estate planning decisions. Her presentation of marriage concerns as protective family intervention disguised inheritance advocacy as relationship counseling that allegedly prioritized my long-term happiness over financial considerations. Military marriages face unique challenges that civilian couples never encounter, and the financial pressures that come with sudden wealth can create additional stress that threatens relationship stability, Amanda explained with apparent concern that was designed to question my marriage while advancing inheritance arguments. Our family wants to ensure that your financial security is protected through structures that do not depend entirely on marriage stability, or Marcus's understanding of our family values and cultural traditions. Kevin's approach to marriage criticism emphasized practical considerations regarding financial management and business development, suggesting that Marcus's military experience provided insufficient preparation for managing substantial civilian financial resources or understanding entrepreneurial opportunities that could benefit from his presentation of marriage limitations as business planning concerns, attempted to establish credibility for family financial involvement, while questioning Marcus's qualifications for partnership in significant financial decisions. Military financial planning focuses on security and conservative investment rather than growth opportunities and business development that could maximize the potential of your acquisition proceeds. Kevin argued with confidence that ignored his consistent record of entrepreneurial failure and poor business judgment. Our family's business experience and understanding of investment opportunities could provide valuable guidance that Marcus's military background has not prepared him to offer regarding wealth management and financial growth strategies. The coordination of these marriage attacks revealed family recognition that undermining my relationship with Marcus represented their most promising strategy for regaining inheritance influence and financial access. Their assumption that questioning marriage stability would create doubt about estate planning arrangements demonstrated fundamental misunderstanding of the strength and authenticity of our partnership, while also revealing their desperation, as other manipulation approaches had proven ineffective. The systematic attacks on my marriage and Marcus's character represented a strategic miscalculation that revealed the desperation underlying my family's inheritance advocacy, while simultaneously strengthening my resolve to protect the authentic relationships that had proven their value through consistent loyalty and mutual support. Their assumption that questioning my marriage would create vulnerability in my estate planning decisions demonstrated fundamental misunderstanding of the trust and partnership that Marcus and I had developed through years of navigating military deployment challenges and professional responsibilities that required unwavering commitment to shared goals. The decision to address family manipulation tactics through direct confrontation rather than continued diplomatic avoidance emerged from recognition that their escalating pressure would continue indefinitely, unless clear boundaries were established and enforced, through consequences that demonstrated the seriousness of my commitment to protecting my autonomous decision-making authority. The time for polite deflection and indirect resistance had passed, requiring forthright communication that eliminated ambiguity about my priorities and expectations regarding future family relationships. Marcus's military experience with strategic planning and decisive action provided valuable framework for developing an approach that would address family manipulation comprehensively, while minimizing opportunities for continued interference or retaliation through extended family members or social networks. His assessment of the situation emphasized the importance of coordinated response that addressed all vectors of family pressure simultaneously, rather than allowing them to adapt their tactics through trial and error with individual family members. The preparation for family confrontation required careful documentation of their inheritance advocacy tactics and marriage attacks to ensure that our response addressed specific behaviors rather than general relationship dissatisfaction that might be dismissed as misunderstanding or temporary stress from my accident recovery. The systematic nature of their manipulation needed to be presented clearly to eliminate opportunities for denial or minimization that could enable continued pressure through alternative approaches. The Chen Martinez Foundation provided an ideal venue for announcing our commitment to charitable giving that would formalize the redirection of my financial resources away from family inheritance and toward meaningful community contribution. The Foundation's mission statement and programming objectives offered concrete evidence of our values and priorities, while demonstrating that our wealth management decisions reflected thoughtful stewardship rather than arbitrary rejection of family financial support requests. The Foundation's annual report detailed our first year of programming achievements, including scholarship awards for 12 military spouses pursuing biomedical engineering education, research grants supporting cardiac monitoring technology development for military medical applications, and counseling services that had assisted over 40 military families experiencing deployment stress and relationship challenges. These accomplishments provided tangible evidence of our commitment to using financial resources for purposes that transcended personal consumption or family financial convenience. The timing of family confrontation coincided with my complete return to leadership responsibilities at MedTech Global Corporation and Marcus's establishment of his security consulting practice, enabling us to address inheritance pressure from positions of professional strength and financial independence, that eliminated any practical leverage my family might attempt to employ through threats of withdrawal of emotional support or family relationship termination. The formal family meeting was scheduled for Sunday afternoon at my parents' home, providing familiar territory that would minimize their anxiety while also ensuring that all primary family members could participate in the conversation that would establish definitive boundaries regarding financial relationships and inheritance expectations. The location choice demonstrated respect for family traditions while also creating an environment where serious discussion could occur without external distractions or time limitations. My opening statement addressed the systematic nature of inheritance pressure that had characterized family relationships since my accident, presenting documented examples of coordination and manipulation that demonstrated their collective approach to securing financial advantages rather than individual expressions of concern for my welfare. The evidence included specific quotations from conversations, text messages, and social media communications that revealed the strategic nature of their inheritance advocacy. I have spent considerable time analyzing family communications and interactions since my accident, and I have identified patterns of coordinated pressure designed to influence my estate planning decisions through emotional manipulation, relationship exploitation, and systematic undermining of my marriage to Marcus. I began with clinical precision that established the serious nature of the conversation while eliminating opportunities for casual dismissal or emotional deflection. The presentation continued with specific examples of inheritance advocacy tactics, including their coordination during hospital visits, their employment of extended family members as pressure intermediaries, and their recent attacks on my marriage through suggestions that Marcus was unsuitable for managing substantial financial resources or understanding family cultural traditions. The documentation provided irrefutable evidence of systematic manipulation that transcended individual relationship concerns to encompass collective financial objectives. My father's initial response attempted to reframe inheritance discussions as legitimate family planning concerns that reflected responsible preparation for potential future emergencies, rather than opportunistic positioning for personal financial benefit. His medical authority was employed to suggest that my analysis of family behavior reflected misinterpretation of normal family concern rather than accurate assessment of inheritance pressure tactics. Family estate planning discussions represent prudent preparation for potential health crises and unexpected circumstances that could affect everyone's financial security. My father explained with professional authority that was designed to provide credibility for their inheritance advocacy, while presenting my resistance as unreasonable rejection of responsible family planning. Our concern about your financial arrangements reflects genuine care for your welfare rather than personal interest in inheritance benefits. Marcus's intervention in this exchange drew from his intelligence analysis training to address the gap between stated motivations and documented behavior that family members had demonstrated throughout the inheritance pressure campaign. His systematic deconstruction of their arguments eliminated opportunities for continued denial while providing objective framework for evaluating their actual priorities versus their claimed concerns. Intelligence analysis requires evaluation of behavior patterns rather than stated motivations when assessing genuine intentions and priorities. Marcus replied with professional objectivity that eliminated emotional content while focusing on factual evidence. The coordination, timing, and specific content of family inheritance advocacy demonstrates strategic planning designed to secure financial advantages rather than authentic concern for Victoria's welfare or family relationship maintenance. Amanda's contribution to the family discussion focused on emotional appeals that emphasized the creative and cultural relationships that my financial support had enabled throughout her artistic career, presenting inheritance planning as continuation of cultural investment rather than personal financial benefit that would support lifestyle maintenance without corresponding productivity or accountability. Your support has enabled artistic contributions to our community that honor our family's commitment to cultural development and creative expression. Amanda explained with apparent sincerity that was designed to transform inheritance claims into cultural preservation arguments. Estate planning that eliminates family consideration would abandon the artistic projects and creative relationships that your generosity has been nurturing for years. My response to Amanda's cultural inheritance arguments addressed the fundamental difference between supporting artistic development through voluntary contribution versus creating perpetual financial obligation through inheritance planning that prioritized her consumption over authentic charitable giving that could benefit broader artistic communities rather than individual family members. Authentic support for artistic development focuses on creating opportunities for cultural contribution rather than subsidizing individual lifestyle choices through inheritance arrangements. I replied with clarity that distinguished between meaningful cultural investment and personal financial support disguised as artistic patronage. Our foundation's programming includes scholarship support for emerging artists from military families, providing opportunities for cultural development that extends beyond family benefit to encompass community contribution. Kevin's approach to inheritance advocacy had evolved to emphasize potential return on investment through his continued entrepreneurial development, presenting family financial support as business investment that would eventually generate returns for everyone rather than simply supporting individual consumption and lifestyle maintenance without accountability for results or strategic planning. My business experience has been providing valuable learning that will eventually generate success that justifies our family's continued investment in my entrepreneurial potential. Kevin argued with optimism that ignored objective evidence regarding his consistent failure to achieve positive results despite years of family financial support. Estate planning should consider the potential for my eventual success to benefit everyone rather than abandoning business development before my efforts can reach profitable completion. Marcus's analysis of Kevin's inheritance arguments focused on the fundamental principles of sound investment planning that required demonstrated competence and strategic value rather than optimistic projections about future potential that lacked supporting evidence or accountability for previous failures. Effective investment planning requires demonstrated performance and strategic competence rather than continued faith in potential that has not materialized despite substantial previous investment. Marcus observed with professional assessment that exposed the weakness of Kevin's inheritance claims. Military resource allocation principles emphasize proven capability rather than optimistic projections when making strategic funding decisions. My mother's concluding contribution to the family discussion employed emotional appeals that emphasized disappointment and betrayal, rather than addressing the specific evidence of inheritance manipulation that had been presented throughout the conversation. Her focus on family loyalty and generational responsibility attempted to transform objective analysis into personal attack that allegedly threatened family unity and cultural traditions. I am deeply disappointed by this conversation and the way our family relationships have been characterized as manipulation rather than genuine love and concern for your welfare. My mother stated with emotional intensity that was designed to generate guilt rather than addressing the documented evidence of systematic inheritance pressure. Our family has always supported each other through difficult times, and I cannot understand how you can allow outside influence to damage relationships that have sustained us throughout our lives. The systematic nature of family inheritance pressure had created a situation that required definitive response, rather than continued negotiation or compromise that would enable ongoing manipulation through alternative approaches. The documentation of their coordination and strategic planning had eliminated opportunities for claiming misunderstanding or temporary stress as explanation for their behavior patterns. My concluding statement established clear consequences for continued inheritance pressure, while leaving opportunities for future relationship development based on authentic mutual respect rather than financial considerations. The boundaries were presented as necessary protection for my autonomous decision-making rather than punishment for previous behavior, creating framework for potential reconciliation if family members demonstrated genuine commitment to relationship improvement. The immediate aftermath of our family confrontation revealed the fundamental transformation that had occurred in family dynamics through the systematic exposure of inheritance, manipulation tactics, and the establishment of boundaries that prioritized authentic relationships over traditional obligations. The silence that followed my concluding statement demonstrated their recognition that continued pressure would be ineffective, while also revealing their struggle to process the reality that their financial leverage had been permanently eliminated through my autonomous decision-making and Marcus's unwavering support. My parents' response to the documented evidence of their inheritance advocacy reflected their difficulty in reconciling their self-perception as loving family members with the objective reality of their manipulative behavior patterns. Their initial attempts to minimize the significance of coordination and strategic planning were undermined by the comprehensive documentation that demonstrated systematic rather than casual approaches to securing financial advantages through emotional manipulation and relationship exploitation. The drive home from my parents' house provided opportunity for Marcus and me to analyze the family meeting outcomes while processing the emotional impact of definitively establishing boundaries that would reshape all future family interactions. The relief that accompanied the completion of this difficult conversation was tempered by recognition that family relationships had been fundamentally altered through revelations that could not be reversed or forgotten, regardless of future reconciliation attempts. Marcus's assessment of the family confrontation emphasized the strategic value of comprehensive documentation and coordinated response in eliminating ambiguity about behavioral expectations and consequences for continued manipulation attempts. His military experience with conflict resolution and relationship management provided perspective on maintaining appropriate boundaries while preserving opportunities for future relationship development based on demonstrated behavioral changes rather than promised improvements. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.